Well, how are you? How was your day?
Oh, I am fine.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Okay. I want to see who was listening and or who read our last class. So we ready to begin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So without flipping the pages out of your head, what is reputation risk?
Okay, I know you don't.
I hear paper.
No. I hear paper too. I hear something in the background shuffling.
No, that's me trying to put my light on, but go ahead.
Okay.
Reputation
Okay,
risk.
so I know you don't want it verbatim, but it's basically just a firm's exposure to any, I guess, damage or infractions that can happen when the business failed to meet the expectations as settled by the relevant stakeholders and partners of the industry. So
Good. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Good. Anybody else has a different one? No? Silence. All right. So reputational risk, like you say, is the risk of damaging the firm's trustworthiness in the marketplace. Because that sums it up. In the marketplace means it can include all stakeholders. And there are lots of different definition of reputation risk. The Basel Committee says reputational risk is the risk arising from negative perception on the part of customers, counterparties, shareholders, investors, debt holders, market analysts, and other relevant parties or regulators that can adversely affect a bank's ability to maintain existing or establish new business relationships and continued access to sources of funding. So you see, you could take the definition of reputation risk and you could tailor it to the firm itself. Now, what we didn't discuss last week, in which you may want to take notes on, is what's the difference between reputation risk management and crisis management? Remember when we were talking about the Tylenol situation, they mentioned that they were in a crisis, but they also had to manage their reputational risk. So there is a difference between reputation risk management and crisis management. Reputation risk management is long-term planning. Crisis management is short-term execution. Reputation risk management is assess and predict which issues will hurt the company's reputation the most before they happen. Crisis management, you're unclear how the issues will affect organizational reputation unless some good reputation risk management has been deployed in advance. Remember now, reputation risk is long-term planning and crisis management is short-term execution. Reputation risk is identifying which reputation attributes should be addressed to mitigate the risk issue. Versus crisis management is the lack of control over the issue unless good reputation risk has been deployed in advance. And remember in Tylenol, they tried to get control over the crisis. In reputation risk management, the ability to manage the issue through a robust enterprise risk management approach. While for crisis management, it is driven by the media and other uncontrollable events and reactions, unless good reputation risk management has been deployed in advance. So you can see that for crisis management, in order to solve a crisis and manage it properly, you must have a good reputation risk management framework in place. So reputation risk management is becoming a central aspect of developing reputation strategy. So developing a reputation strategy requires some competencies for success. You have to understand that reputation strategy is a long-term vision. The ability to assess and predict what issues will hurt company reputation the most. Having the capability to identify of reputation attributes that will mitigate the issue. Being able to manage the issues through proper internal resources and budget. Having the authority to identify and empower risk owners and other management in charge. Having the skills to influence the company culture. And having a keen understanding and prioritization of stakeholders. So remember in the last class, we spoke about reputational risk stakeholders. Now we can take reputational risk stakeholders and we can divide them internal versus external. So who are the internal reputation stakeholders? Teresa. Who are the internal reputation stakeholders?
I would say management, senior management, staff. Well, I would say almost everyone within the organization would be some form of stakeholder and would be managing reputational risk.
Right. So that includes the owners, the shareholders, any investors, their family members, the public, the government, the board, trustees or supervisors, any committees or chairs of any committee, any advisors, employees, whether they're permanent or temporary or contractual workers. It also includes the labor unions. All of those are internal reputation stakeholders. And you also have external reputation stakeholders. And who could they be?
That's a question for me as well.
Yeah, but no, someone else can take it. Ebony, Johnson, Shirella, anyone can take it. The external reputation stakeholders.
I would say regulators, if you're a financial institution, shareholders, if you're a consumer, a customer, you would be an external stakeholder.
But also you could include government agencies. Forget now, another external reputation stakeholder, remember in the Tylenol case was who? The media. The media, social media, the users of your products, prospective employees, all of those are external stakeholders. So when there is an issue with an organization with its reputation risk, each one of those stakeholders has a reaction. Are you all familiar with the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster? They even made a movie out of it. No one recalls that?
No. Is this the same as like what happened in Flint, Michigan, or something else?
This was in the ocean, drilling for oil.
No.
Yes, this was the oil spill.
Yes, I remember.
You remember that? BP Deepwater Horizon disaster. And so if you would charge now with dealing with reputational risk and looking at that disaster, you have to take each one of those stakeholders and you have to more or less interpret what their reaction would be based on the disaster. So for the employees and the families, remember they had debts. So that could be people being very angry, and they could begin to distrust the firm. Because they would be saying that the firm didn't do enough in order to safeguard the lives of their family members. The other stakeholder could be the partners, because remember, when you're drilling for oil, there are lots of different partners. So each partner would begin to blame each other. Then you have the community at large. And they would begin to be looking at who is going to pay for the damages. Then you have to look at the protected habitats. Looking at the destruction of the wildlife in the area where they had that oil spill. Then look at the clients of BP worldwide. They would then be thinking about boycotting BP. Investors will begin to start to say whether or not they need to remain as investors for the long term, or whether they need to divest immediately. Then there's the regulators. If they were too lax, then they have to think about how they can enforce regulations so that it doesn't happen again. And of course, of last but not least is obviously the media. And the media either accepts the statements that comes from the firm, or they're critical of it, or they do investigative reports. And all of that falls under trying to manage reputational risk and how you're going to deal with managing that risk. Any questions? No? So we did reputation risk last class. So now let's look at ethics. What is business ethics? Anybody? Because you could find so many stories of unethical business practices in a lot of companies. Because whenever you hear the word ethics, you think about morally what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Just moral, the moral conduct of a firm, and even if you look at an individual, you always look at what's moral. I don't want to use the word ethical, but yeah, but yeah, moral conduct.
So unethical business practices, it really defines anything that falls below the minimum standards for business code of conduct. So most companies have a code of conduct. So this includes any behavior or behaviors that are what you call widely accepted as being morally wrong. And it could either lead to mistreatment of people, mistreatment of animals, or even the environment. So on the first page, I've given you various different quotes and definition of business ethics. So what is it? It focuses on identifying the moral standards of right and wrong as they apply to behavior within and across business institutions and other related organizations. Corporations sometimes behave unethically, having a harmful effect on people or the environment. Unethical behavior is typically not caused by a single bad apple, but is a result of complex interactions between individuals, group, and organizational cultures. Any research that you do dealing with unethical behavior in organizations, you will see it is never one bad apple. It's always more than one person. And in order for that to perpetuate, it has to be an organizational culture that allows it to happen. And organizational culture means that either you have a very weak screening policy or your controls are not being monitored properly. There's some weaknesses in your controls. Or you haven't put measures in place to mitigate against certain risks. So ethical behavior can be defined either as behavior that maximizes happiness and minimizes harm, or as behavior that is motivated by principles of duty. While behaving unethically may have some short-term benefits for a company, in the long term, it will harm stakeholder support. So the cost of poor ethical decisions in businesses was discussed in the address done by Simon Coulhan, Integrity Matters, You Be the Judge. And he stated that many of the corporate failures were due to a lack of integrity. He cited, for example, an Indian computer company based in the United Kingdom. The company had indicated that they employed 54,000 people, but there were only 40,000 in reality. The executives pocketed the salaries of the 14,000 supposed employees. So when making a business decision, Coulhan's philosophy is to ask 4 questions. Is it honest? Is it open? Is it transparent? And is it fair? So poor ethical decisions cost corporations millions and millions of dollars, both in terms of opportunities lost due to loss of sales and as a result of unfavorable public opinion, and in payouts to executives whose contracts must be terminated as a result of the unethical decisions made. So there's a chart there that shows the massive amounts of money paid out in severance packages to CEOs of 10 corporations, where the CEO decisions were, to say the least, questionable, if not outright unethical. Because remember now, you have a CEO who can make unethical decisions. But remember now, his employment is based on a contract. So in ExxonMobil, Lee Raymond, his estimated severance pay was $351 million. And I think if you recall, quite a few years back, there was a lot of discussion in the media about all of these CEOs who were found to have made unethical decisions, leaving with these huge sums of money as severance pay. Anyone recalls that? So businesses use unethical practices that target customers. They hope consumers will fail to notice that they're being tricked. That's one of the common unethical business practices. And they rely on the fact that they'll be able to make numerous sales without the word spreading that they're being deceptive. One of those ways they can do that is having false product claims. The second way is they can have a hidden term in the user agreement. So like, let's say, for example, if every time you sign up for a new service or you download a software, you need to click the agree button on the user agreement. And most people don't read these pages on those agreements.
Wow.
That's crazy. So I
Yes.
didn't even notice that. Wow.
This is why reputation risk is a long-term strategy, because you have to look at all of these potential. So by doing that, you may be allowing the company to sell your data to a third party. Or you may be given a social media platform the rights to your contents. So what the company is sometimes doing is put these terms inside the contract that require the requirements that are not actually legal. They are unenforceable and can even result in lawsuits. Another way they can actually do this misleading the stakeholders is unethical accounting. Intentionally mismanaging accounts to make the company look more profitable. That's what they did with Enron. And this hurts the investors, because the investors is purchasing shares under the assumption that the company is doing very well, when in fact the company is losing money. So in addition to just looking at it from a customer point of view, there are other types of unethical business practices, such as those towards employees. One could be poor working conditions, low wages for long hours, overtime being refused, the threat of being fired. Even during the pandemic, a lot of people were forced to work in unsafe conditions because they didn't have the protective equipment, or they weren't able to maintain social distancing, or because they had to work. Another unethical behavior could be sexual harassment. Because sometimes when someone wants to report that there's been sexual harassment, the company dismisses the employee because they're reporting it. Or what they do is they use gag orders to keep the cases out of the public knowledge. Then you could have unfair competition. And that's one of the biggest threats to a business competitors. And some people do it by just attacking their competitor, doing different types of unethical business practices. Or you could have defamation. You could just spread false information over the computer. Some businesses create fake accounts on social media, and some people post blogs and spread lies about their competitor. So there's a lot of different unethical business practices. Some are legal, but still unethical. Any comments?
Good evening, Ms. Asha. Do you recall the Cleco case? Were there any unethical practices that resulted in the closure of that company? I remember it being in the news, and I remember my grandparents being affected, but never really knew the backstory.
No, nothing has come out yet. Nobody has written anything. All I know is it collapsed. How it happened? Yeah, haven't seen it. But you know, in the Bahamas, we don't write things.
True.
Versus other jurisdictions. So let's take Wells Fargo. They had one massive scandal after another. And in 1981, They were involved in one of the largest embezzlements in history, the shady mortgage practices. And they were a major player in the 2008 financial crisis. So to help the business recover, what did Wells Fargo do? They pressured the employees to set up hidden accounts in customers' name. And they did that until it was discovered. The brand Ferrero USA. That's the brand that does that peanut butter thing, Nutella. They had to pay a settlement of $3 million for false advertising, saying that its chocolate spread is the nutritious choice for children. Then you remember all the scandal with Volkswagen, the emission scandal, where they installed software that manipulated the emissions readings to make it appear that the Volkswagen was environmentally healthy or friendly. Then you had Foxconn, accused of violating labor rights. They were employing children as young as 14 to work in the factories in China. And the supplier provides products to both Apple and Amazon, but they had child labor. You have Coca-Cola. They promoted Powerade. And they promoted saying that it had more electrolytes than Gatorade. So Pepsi sued Coca-Cola, claiming that they had no basis in science. I know you all know the brand Halliburton. They were accused of doing business with countries that the US had banned trade relations with. They were also overcharging the US Army for supplies during one of the wars. They were mismanaging base. They even had offenses against them for sexual assault and exposing the employees to hazardous chemicals. And later down, we'll talk about how a lot of companies are dealing now with employees who are coming out and blowing the whistle. So given the increasing social impact of business ethics has emerged as a discrete subject over the last 20 years. Business ethics is concerned with exploring the moral principles by which we can evaluate business organizations in relation to their impact on people and the environment. Trevino and Nelson categorizes 4 types of ethical behaviors that are commonly found in business organizations. The first one is human resource problems. And these relate to the equitable and just treatment of current and potential employees. Unethical behavior involves treating people unfairly because of their gender, their sexuality, their skin color, religion, ethnic background, and so on. Second are ethical problems arising from conflict of interest, when particular individuals or organizations are given special treatment because of some personal relationship with the individual or the group making a decision. A company might get a lucrative contract, for example, because a bribe was paid to the management team of the contracting organization, not because of the quality of the proposal. Third, ethical problems that involve customer confidence. Corporations sometimes behave in a way that show a lack of respect for customers or lack of concern with public safety. A good example, advertisements that lie, or at least conceal the truth about particular goods or services, and the sale of products such as drugs, where a company conceals or obfuscates negative data about safety and or efficacy. And then there are ethical problems surrounding the use of corporate resources by employees who make private phone calls at work, submit false expense claims, take company stationery home, etc. All of that is unethical. So the financial scandals that have rocked the corporate world, such as Enron, WorldCom, Parmalat, Lehman Brothers, have involved a number of these different ethical issues. In these cases, senior management have engaged in improper bookkeeping, making companies look more financially profitable than they actually are. As a consequence, the stockholder value of the company increases, and anyone with stock profits directly. Among those profiting will be those making the decisions to manipulate the accounts, and so there is a conflict of interest. The fallout from the downfall of these companies affects stockholders, employees, and society at large negatively, with innocent people losing their retirement reserves and or savings, and employees losing their jobs. Another category can be the use of the world's environmental resources. And if you look at a lot of organizations now, you'll see they have a whole department that has to do with sustainability, which means looking at the environment and how the organization works within the environment, and what it is doing to help to sustain the environment itself, along with its corporate social responsibility. So many organizations have externalized the costs associated with their negative impact on the environment, whether in relation to their own operations to produce goods and services, or in terms of the use and later the disposal of the goods that they have sold. Externalizing means that organizations do not themselves pay for the environmental costs that they create. For example, carbon dioxide emissions, a byproduct of energy used for all kinds of organizations, are now recognized as contributing to global warming. Computer equipment contains toxic waste that pollutes the land where it is dumped. And packaging of all kinds, including plastic bags that are handed out by supermarkets, are creating mounting problems as local authorities run out of landfill sites. And so you can see now why the Bahamas discontinue plastic bags, because it is harmful to the environment, especially the fish. Ethical business is seen to require that a business takes into account and offsets its environmental footprint so that it engages in sustainable activity. Sustainability broadly means that a business meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So let me ask you all the question. Do you think your organization focuses on sustainability?
Yes.
No. Oh, sorry.
Well, for the most part, we're fintech, so we really try to eliminate, the need for printing and wastage. I think, as time progresses, a lot of companies would, aim towards the same thing. So I think as a country, we're trying to get there. Not quite there as yet, but I do see the efforts.
You see the efforts? You really do?
In my company.
Okay, in your company. So let's just say we're in Nassau. Let's look at Nassau as a whole.
As a whole, I honestly, the last two places I worked at, they were doing. So that's why I could speak from that perspective. We're very behind when we look at other countries, America, Sweden, and the UK and all that stuff. We're very behind, but the companies that I had worked for in the past, I see where they were trying to, and of course they are, the reason they're doing that is because like the headquarters, their company's base is doing the same thing. So they were pretty much just following suit. So yeah.
But we have Bahamians in every corner of this earth. Everywhere. Bahamians have worked practically everywhere in the world. Some are still working there. Why isn't sustainability on the top of our corporate responsibility?
I think for the most part, with Bahamian companies, corporate responsibility for them is really just a way to get their company out there and to look good in the public eyesight. It's really not about, you know, the true essence of what corporate responsibility is. And yeah, it's not that important for them. But Jay, I know Jay have more on that.
Me? Jesus Christ.
And you.
Wow. Well, everybody know I worked at Bank of the Bahamas, and certain things I really cannot say because, you know, things is things.
Yeah, but don't forget, you all issue an annual report.
We do.
Right. So in that annual report, it should speak about corporate responsibility and sustainability.
It should.
Yeah, it should. I'll tell you, I watched a video with this company somewhere up north. I don't know, Norway, Finland, one of those places. And this guy had just started his company. And this company is based on collecting garbage. And based on this garbage, he has entered in, he has the machinery to take that garbage and convert that garbage into energy. And he has partnered with the government, and he supplies electricity to certain areas where he has his landfills, recycling that garbage and making it into energy. Please tell me why we cannot do that. All this garbage that they're collecting.
I mean, we all know that we are a corrupt nation. The minute we start doing things like that and thinking for the community, it's going to take monies out of some people's pockets. So I think for us being such a small country where they make everything seem like a challenge, you know, and at the end of the day, the only logical explanation is because some people will not be paid.
But
ding, ding, ding.
But instead of thinking of being paid, they should think of becoming investors.
Exactly.
That's how they need to think.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I totally agree because I believe in the Bahamas, there's no way that we should be depending on petroleum or whatever fuel it is to power the whole city when we live in the sun 98% of the year. That doesn't make any sense to me.
No.
I think I saw somewhere recently that the government had announced that it had created like a focus group, basically to focus on sustainability, and I guess try to find ways in which it could make the Bahamas more sustainable.
And stop selling the salt to the white people to sell it back to us. How about that? Let's start there. Okay.
Right. So, I mean, I could be wrong, but I just wanted to mention in terms of my organization, Central Bank, of course, we started a no paper policy a couple of years ago. Even in terms of the cafeteria, before the pandemic, were required to bring our own Tupperware and utensils to eat in the cafeteria. So I see us. And then, of course, with the new building, that was one of the primary focuses. So I don't know if anyone has seen like the plans or anything yet, but the new building is supposed to be very environmentally friendly. I also wanted to say that I noticed the externalized costs when my dad takes his car to be serviced at Omega Motors. They charge him like an environmental tax levy, and it's a lot. So I guess they would have externalized whatever cost it takes for them to get rid of the oil and stuff that they remove from the car. They pass that cost on to their customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think as a very, very small island, because there are a lot of islands that are much bigger than us, and they're cleaner than us, and they don't spend this amount of money on electricity. Anyone you ask who living on an island, so they do not spend, especially when summer comes and you have to start using air conditioning. No one pays no $400, $500, and $600 a month to pay for air conditioning.
That's all I saying.
Totally.
You know that Florida, my aunt lives in Florida, and she says that her company only uses solar power energy to run their city. She only pays like $90, and she's have an AC on all day, every day, all month. And you telling me the Bahamas, sunshine and sea? I don't understand.
Okay. So when you look at corporate responsibility and sustainability, it encompasses all of that. It's not just about, okay, no more plastic bags because it's damaging the fish in the water. There are more things that we can do. And the more things that we do will also help us with having healthier individuals. And it comes down to the same thing in terms of what we import and what we grow. Climate change. They should be looking to see which islands other than Andros we can grow products on. Not all products require fertile ground. Tell me, why can't we grow rice? I've watched people in Ecuador planting rice. And I thought that the field with the water where they were planting the rice, I thought that was natural. No, man-made. And they produce rice and they ship rice all over South America, all grades of rice. Why can't we do it? Even if it's just enough to sustain ourselves. But this brings us back to the point that you made earlier. This is all about ethical and unethical behavior and looking at the big picture. So whenever you talk about ethics, you always see that corruption comes in. Because that's one of the main stumbling blocks to running any organization ethically is corruption. So despite popular belief, decisions harmful to others or to the environment that are made within organizations are not typically the result of an isolated, immoral individual. It's never a one-man show. Although an individual's level of moral maturity or the locus of control are factors, we also need to explore the decision-making context, the group dynamics, and the organizational practices and procedures to understand why an unethical decision was made. The degree to which decisions are ethical is also influenced by organizational culture or the climate within the organization. Organizational ethical climates can differ. Sometimes you could have someone who's at the top or the head of a department who is egotistic. You could have others who are more benevolent. And then you have some who are highly principled. And in these contexts can shape a manager's ethical decision-making. So Smith and Johnson identified 3 general approaches that organizations take to corporate responsibility. Social obligation. The corporation does only what is legally required. Social responsiveness. The corporation responds to pressure from different stakeholder groups. And then social responsibility. The corporation has an agenda of proactively trying to improve society. In a company in which the dominant approach to business ethics is social obligation, it is likely to be difficult to justify a decision based on ethical criteria. Morally irresponsible behavior may be condoned as long as it doesn't break the law. Legal loopholes, for example, may be exploited in such a company if these can benefit the company in the short term, even if they might have a negative influence on others in society. Sometimes it is clear that a business has behaved unethically. For example, where a drug is sold illegally, the company accounts are being falsely presented, or where client funds have been embezzled. Of more interest and much more common are situations that pose an ethical dilemma, situations that present a conflict between right and wrong, between values and obligations, so that a choice is necessary. For example, a corporation may want to build a new factory on a previously undeveloped and popular tourist site in a location where there is a large-scale unemployment among the local population. Here we have a conflict between the benefits of wealth and job creation in a location in which these are crucial, and the cost of spoiling some naturally beautiful countryside. So think about the pigs in Adelaide. Do you think that was a good business decision?
I thought you was gonna say the building of a whole island on where did it is downtown, so they could make a straw market center for the ports, so they fill in the whole ocean. Oh.
But they
I just don't see the sense in that.
But they would have done an environmental impact assessment, though.
I hope so.
I would hope so. But you see, all of these look at social responsibility. And of course, underlying most of this is corruption. So when you talk about ethical theories, there are two schools of thought. What philosophers have done is they've developed what they call the prescriptive theories, providing the universal laws between right and wrong. You have the consequentialist and the non-consequentialist. So the consequentialists, the philosophers who adopt this approach, consider that behavior can be judged ethical if it has been enacted in order to maximize human happiness and minimize harm. Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill are two of the best-known early proponents of this view. They say it is the common good, not personal happiness, that is the arbiter of right and wrong. Indeed, we are required to sacrifice our personal happiness if doing so enhances the total sum of happiness. So for someone faced with a decision choice, the ethical action is the one that achieves the greatest good for the greatest number of people, after weighing the impact on those involved. Common criticisms of this approach are that it is impossible to measure happiness adequately, and that it essentially condones injustice, if this is to benefit the majority. Non-consequentialists, the philosophers who adopt this approach, argue that behavior can be judged as ethical if it is based on a sense of duty and carried out in accordance with defined principles. Immanuel Kant articulated the principle of respect for persons, which states that people should never be treated as a means to an end, but always as an end in themselves, leading to the easy to remember maxim, do as you would be done by. The idea here is that we can establish moral judgments that are true because they are based on a unique human ability to reason. One common criticism of this approach is that it is impossible to agree on the basic ethical principles of duty or their relative meaning in order to direct choices when multiple ethical principles are called into question at the same time, or when decisions cut across cultures with different ethical principles. So a lot of people, I guess, make an attempt at unethical behavior when they see that there are gaps in processes, or if they know that there are no controls in place, or they're able to look at the frequency of when checks and balances take place. So why is behaving ethically important for business? Choosing to be ethical can involve short-term disadvantages for a corporation. Yet in the long term, it is clear that behaving ethically is the key to sustainable development. When you're faced with an ethical dilemma in which the immoral choice looks appealing, ask yourself 3 questions. What will happen when, not if, what will happen when the action is discovered? Is the decision really in the long-term interest of the corporation? And will the organizations that behave unethically attract the employees they need? Do you think people ask these questions before they steal? Because we've had a lot of theft.
No, they don't.
Nope, nope.
So you actually tell me people are stealing these money and think that they will never be caught?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, probably because they've seen it done before too.
And people got away with it.
Yep.
So let's look at the first one. What will happen if you're discovered? The behavior of corporations is under scrutiny from their various stakeholders. And that's why you see some organizations, when they found out that some people would have stolen from the organization, they just quietly let them go. Because what happened? It affects their reputation.
Some of them do it publicly too, though.
Yes, some do it publicly.
So that we know they don't have a tolerance for it.
And that's and that they use that as an attraction for employees. Because people say that's an upright company. They don't tolerate unethical behavior. But always remember, a company is always under scrutiny by its stakeholders. People are less willing to keep quiet when they feel an injustice has been done. And the internet and other media give them the means to make their concerns very public, reaching a global audience. Corporations that behave unethically are unlikely to get away with it, and the impact when they are discovered can be catastrophic. And this leads to the second question. Is it really in the long-term interest of the corporation? So many financial institutions or financial services companies in the UK generated short-term profits in the 1990s by mis-selling personal pensions to people who would have been better off staying in their company's pension plan. However, in the long term, these companies have suffered by having to repay this money and pay penalties. The practice has eroded public confidence. The same is true of many banks and mortgage brokers in the first part of the 21st century, when they sold mortgages to individuals who could not afford to repay their debts. The eventual result was that large numbers defaulted, causing a meltdown in the global financial system beginning in 2008. And I can tell you now, when you look at some of the cases that are tried in the courts, and when the judges go back to the very beginning as to when the mortgage would have first been granted, and look at the track record of the borrower repaying the mortgage, you get a sense from reading the document that those persons may have been qualified for the mortgage on paper on that day, but they never look at whether or not they will be able to sustain that as time went on. Because some of these people started to default after 1 year. Will organizations that behave unethically attract the employees they need? Corporations that harm society or the environment can actually be harming their own employees, including those who are making the decisions. For example, corporations that pour toxins into the air are polluting the air their employees and families breathe. Ultimately, a business relies on its human resources. And if a company cannot attract high quality people because it has a poor public image based on previous unethical behavior, it will certainly flounder. Anyone can think of a company that has a poor public image here in the Bahamas?
B.O.B.
Oh,
I'm only kidding.
right.
Poor public image.
Due to ethical behavior. And remember that ethical behavior doesn't have to be
some of these offshore banks, some of these Bahamian owned, some of these Bahamian offshore banks.
You know, I am tending to agree with you, because someone told me a story today, which I cannot repeat, about how they were treated at an offshore bank.
It's a safe space. Stop recording.
It was totally unbelievable the way they were treated by the foreigner. It was unbelievable. The way they were spoken to.
Yeah, that's how they treat us.
I believe it.
Some of them.
Yeah, some of them. Not all, some. There wasn't no discrimination in terms of color of skin. It's just their whole attitude.
No, they think we dumb. They think we don't understand what they're saying. You know, like they think we are not capable of executing the task that they ask. I heard a couple of stories about that before, where they talk down to them as if they don't have the same degree.
Yeah.
Like we don't have the same degree as you. Like, hello.
But the thing about it, some of them do not have a degree. A lot of them, they come in like from Switzerland or whatever, working on farms, working literally nowhere. And they come with, never mind.
But remember now, you're not first world. You have a degree, but you're not from a first world. You got to look at it from their perspective. Are you really? Can you say Bahamas is on par with Switzerland? Bahamas is on par with Norway in terms of history, work history, country level, are we? From their eyes.
Yeah, but you still can't talk to me no type of way though. Still.
I agree with you. You're talking about from human to human.
One Will Smith slap.
Stop.
Then you're really looking to get fired. Yes, but there is a lot of it. And there is a disparity when it comes to wages also. They're not paid the same.
The sad thing is they don't want Bahamians anyway. When they post the ads, they're like, junior relationship manager must be able to speak Portuguese, Dutch, English, Spanish, and French. So then they have to import the person.
But in today's world, how many people do not speak English? Everybody learns English now. Everybody.
I agree. But I noticed they speaking on Sharella's point, they did say that in the papers where they would be false advertising and still bringing people over instead of, actually giving Bahamians a shot. And at this point, you in the Bahamas, what you gonna do? You gonna be Switzerland or you gonna be Bahamian? If you can do all two, go back. That's how I feel. They should shut down some of these places. Go home.
But you know, it depends on, again, it depends on the persons that work with the organization. So say I'm working there, right? And they say they need a relationship, somebody, I don't know, any position. And they ask for all of these languages. You work there. You know that that position does not call for that. You know your client base, the majority of your people speak English. You know that based upon whatever that they do, or whoever they communicate with, everybody speaks English. Then it is up to you now to do the ethical thing, which is to call immigration.
Mood.
But that's the only way you'll be able to deal with the situation, because what? They come and they stay.
Oh, they demand to get them. They demand to get them. What the Dominicans was doing, yes, the Dominicans, they was trying to get permanent residency so they could work and stuff and
Yes, and the thing about it is this: when they come at a certain level, when they leave job A, they can go to B, C, or D, or E in that same level. So that means you who've been working will never get to that level because it will never be available to you. Because they move around in that circle. So it's all about ethical behavior. When you would have come here, you would have come here on a 5-year contract or a 3-year contract, and they make the statement when they introduce that they're only here for 3 years or 5 years. They're here to train someone and they'll be gone. Next thing you know, they're here, they have a whole family and they live here. So making a sound ethical decision. First thing to do is gather the facts. What's the problem and what are the potential solutions? Define the ethical issues. This is a step that is often neglected, so that the ethical dilemmas raised by a particular decision are never even considered. Identify the various stakeholders involved. Think through the consequences of each solution. What happiness or harm will be caused? Identify the obligations and rights to those potentially affected. What is my duty here? Can I uphold my duty to avoid doing harm and make reasonable efforts towards the end? And of course, check your gut feeling. The last step is crucial. Those involved need to ask themselves what they would feel like if friends or family found out they had been involved in making a particular corporate decision, whether personally or collectively. And sometimes when you sit around the table, sometimes you have that pressure on you when you have the vote. And the item that's on the table and the decision that's being made to you is unethical. What will you do? Will you put your hand up and vote no and give the reason why? Or will you follow the crowd and just vote yes? So when it comes to corporate responsibility, there are 4 key areas of corporate social responsibility. And those 4 main areas assess social responsibility. That's community relations. The company should have a formal policy and operation towards community relations. So that's why you see normally down in the sports section, you see lots of different entities standing up with their piece of cardboard with a check, 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, 2,500. That's where they're showing their corporate and their community relations. Then you look at the impact on local communities. and the area in close proximity to a company's operation should be continually monitored. So that's where you see a lot of sponsorship. Participate in local community in a positive manner. Companies are encouraged to participate in local communities, encouraging their employees to volunteer for local schemes, as well as sponsoring local events. The management of human rights issues in the supply chain forms part of or should form part of the company's commitment to social responsibility, and as such is an integral part of the sourcing process. Minimum requirements expected from suppliers on their commitment to human rights should be included in all contracts. Some large shareholders are motivated to promote corporate social responsibility because of its capacity to enhance the company's reputation and survival. Environmental responsibility. Limit impact on the environment. The company must ensure that any impact on the local environment or its operations are fully assessed and action taken to limit such impact where possible. Then you have energy awareness. The company must make efforts towards reduction of energy consumption and carbon emissions. Corporate ethics. IC 9900 companies demonstrate a clear understanding of the importance of ethical conduct, encouraging employees to participate in this and having internal measures and systems to ensure consistency. The company should encourage the highest standards of ethical conduct among its employees. It should recruit and retain staff in accordance with ethical standards. It should meet the requirements of the Fair Pay Scheme, which means paying a reasonable wage, protecting the rights of employees, whether permanent or contractual. Provide a safe and secure environment for employees to work, other than those generally accepted by processes. The environment should be free from internal threats and harassments by other members of staff. A clear process must exist for staff to raise grievances, and this process must be enforced and disciplinary action supported by any findings. Comply with local employment laws and comply with International Charter on Human Resources, best practices, policies. Companies are encouraged to develop leadership essentials and begin a program of work with employees to ensure these qualities are found at all levels of the organization. The company should undertake an annual leadership survey, polling staff on their opinions and suggestions. Based on their feedback, a leadership strategy should be developed. The company's leaders must indicate a clear direction with viable strategy. They must not abuse market dominance and not create false barriers to entry. The end-of-year reports must be validated by both the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Financial Officer, and in their absence, approval must be sought from the Board of Directors. Now, there's always a legal versus an ethical debate. Every decision that can be made falls into one of the following categories: legal and ethical, legal but not ethical, not legal but ethical, and neither legal nor ethical. So whenever you talk about ethical behavior, in most organizations today, they have a whistleblowing policy. So who wants to share their whistleblowing policy in their organization? Want to start with you, Ebony? Ebony. Let's go to Jamie. Jamie.
Yes, I'm here.
Does your organization have a whistleblowing policy?
I don't know.
What you mean?
I would think so.
But you supposed to.
I've never seen it.
You've never heard of it?
I've never seen the policy.
So let me ask you, if you see or you're privy to an unethical behavior, what are you going to do?
I would report it.
To who?
It depends on what it is. So I would report it to the HR manager or office manager.
Every organization should have a clear reporting line for whistleblowing. Remember, whistleblowing is confidential. So there should be an actual process in place. And normally you report to an independent person, not within the organization itself. Anybody else want to share theirs?
Well, we are to report any suspicious transaction or potential transaction to the MLRO or the compliance company as soon as possible or whenever we come across anything.
Okay, so that's that part on the legal side. Now, what if you discover that someone was stealing? What will you do?
Oh, you mean within the bank?
Yeah.
Or the establishment, usually in the bank too. That's also there. We have to report suspicious activity externally or internally.
What if you saw or you became aware that there was a conflict of interest with someone within the organization?
Well, let me say this. So I worked at Bank of the Bahamas, where everything might be because of some. Seriously, like for real, like I can't even.
I understand that. I know where you're going. But normally when you have a whistleblowing policy in place, an organization gets to see exactly what's happening.
My company has, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
The last 3 companies that I've worked at, we've had whistleblowing policies, and in all 3 instances, we used a third-party vendor so that employees could report. You had 3 options. One, you could do it via the telephone, and then it was outsourced to Miami. You could do it through the portal. And what it does is that anonymously you make the report based on the category. It assigns it to an investigator. That investigator has a checker. So I can't, for example, if someone reports sexual harassment, I can't just get it and say, oh, that's my friend, and delete it. Someone else actually is responsible for being like the control. Being the control to make sure that things are investigated.
So in all of this discussion tonight about ethical behavior and ethics in business and corporate social responsibility, and an organization should have a whistleblowing policy and a whistleblowing process.
Agreed.
So in the case of Telia, that was a Swedish telecoms operator. They developed their own internal whistleblowing reporting system called the Speak Up Line. And within a year, the system received 92 reports of suspected incidents of conflict of interest, corruption, embezzlement, procurement fraud, and human resource matters. Encouraging a company culture focused on ethics and integrity produced extraordinary results for Telia in its first 12 months. The line uncovered potentially fraudulent activity involving a former senior manager, third-party relationships related to personal gain that have been entered in breach of standard procurement processes, and possibly to support embezzlement of funds, and several breaches of the company's code of ethics and conduct. The Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer Atilia noted that it's important to engage employees to be able to reap all of the benefits of a whistleblowing system. Employees and stakeholders need to trust the system to submit the report. We are continuously raising awareness and are transparent in our communication to maintain the highest level of trust in the organization. In the case of Lux Leaks, Anton Deltor leaked documents from his employer that helped expose around 340 businesses who were avoiding paying tax by creating complex financial structures and obtaining tax rulings that allowed the use of these structures within Luxembourg. They then channeled billions of euros through the Grand Duchy, with some organizations paying less than 1% tax on their profits. So Deltor downloaded the evidence, passed it on to a French journalist who reported on the leaks on TV. And the accounting firm that employed Deltor prosecuted him for leaking the documents, which resulted in him receiving a 6-month suspended sentence and a €1,500 fine in 2014. However, he was awarded the European Citizens Award in 2015 by the European Parliament in recognition of his revelations. In 2018, he was cleared of his conviction and officially recognized as a whistleblower. The LuxLeaks case is a prime example of retaliation and was one of the triggers that spurred the creation of more stringent whistleblowing laws in the European Union and the whistleblowing directives. And then there are other cases that speak about whistleblowing. In the Danske Bank, the British banker Howard Wilkinson uncovered a €200 billion money laundering scheme running through Danske Bank's branch in Estonia between 2007 and 2015. And it involved payments made through the branch from non-resident accounts based in Russia, Cyprus, and the UK. Many of the transfers were made by shell companies and then went out again to recipients in more than 150 different countries. Wilkinson, who was Danske Bank's head of trading in the Baltic states, discovered that accounts labeled as dormant were transacting millions of euros every day, and he blew the whistle once he discovered what was happening within the organization. However, he claims the bank ignored him, and the scandal did not become public knowledge for 4 years, when Wilkinson's name was illegally leaked to an Estonian newspaper against his will. So you see, there's a lot of advantages to having a whistleblowing policy for the organization.
Sorry, are the cases you just read supposed to be in the notes?
No, I can scan it to you though.
Okay. And one more question, what is IC 9900 companies?
I know he's gonna ask me that. That's the security principles.
Okay.
So the EU has a very good whistleblowing directive, and it stipulates how individuals should state their concern, which whistleblowing reporting channels employ, and how organizations should respond to reports. It says, reporting a concern. Whistleblowers should have reasonable grounds to believe that the information on breaches reported was true at the time of reporting. They should then share their report through one of the available reporting channels within their organization, which should allow them to do so in writing, orally, or both. And they should be able to do so with confidentiality, giving as much detail as they can to allow the organization to investigate fully. And this should include the nature of the complaint, for example, fraud, money laundering, safety concerns, and so on. Some examples of reporting channels include a dedicated phone line, face-to-face meeting, a post office box in the office, a dedicated email address, or an online whistleblowing portal. And the benefits of using an online reporting portal are numerous. They can ensure confidentiality and anonymity if needed. And of course, it is compliant with the Data Protection Act in the EU in terms of data handling. And responding to a concern, the organization must ensure a competent and impartial person or department is tasked with receiving the reports and investigating them. And this could be the same individual or department or two separate parties. They should respond to acknowledge receipt of the report within 7 days and then provide feedback on the investigation within 3 months of that acknowledgement. So if you have an online system, it would allow you to see at a glance the progress of the cases on the dashboard, as well as to receive notifications when deadlines are due. And it helps to ensure that you're always compliant at all times. Any questions on whistleblowing, unethical behavior? No? So next week, did you receive a very small binder from the office with documents in it on corporate governance?
Not yet.
Well, don't say that.
It's in the big binder, corporate governance duties of board and management.
Oh, and in the big binder.
Some handouts from the OECD. One is
here, so
OECD. Let me see. Make the names for you.
okay.
OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises.
I see disclosures and transparency.
That's not in there.
Okay, so no.
What do you mean? Not there. You should have the UK stewardship code. No?
We have the UK corporate governance code.
Okay. The UK stewardship code. The Financial Reporting Council on Risk Management Internal Controls. And then I also gave you the corporate governance AGMs, an opportunity for change. Yes?
I'm looking, I don't see any of that yet.
No?
No.
Okay, I have to make sure you get it for next class. So next class, we're gonna look at corporate governance, the independent director, and of course, disclosure.
We got them via email.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah, we got them via email.
okay, all right. So everybody has it. Okay, so you want us
Yes,
to
I see it.
now, or you want to leave that for next week? So we could do corporate governance, the INED and disclosures together.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sounds
all
good to
right.
me.
Okay. Because I prefer not to start corporate governance and then you, in your mind, you run it into business ethics. The same way how we did reputation by itself, that these three go together. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Right. So we will meet again next Wednesday, same time.
Yes, Mom.
Right. And at that time, then have your the documents that he sent electronically, have those up.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night,
Evening.
everyone.
I